Raise your hand if you have ever suffered from imposter syndrome. If you have, you are not alone. I have been there too. Today, I am welcoming on the Creating Opportunities podcast, Brittany Ashley. Brittany is the founder and owner of Creative Dynamic Virtual Services. She helps moms create virtual assistant business or virtual service businesses, but she also is an imposter syndrome coach. And so today we are going to hear some of her story, some of why she decided to start her business, why we get imposter syndrome, and how we can deal with it. So please come join me in welcoming Brittany. But of course, before we get into it, welcome to the Creating Opportunities podcast. This is the place where we help you build authentic relationships for success in all areas of your life. Why? Because people matter. And I am your host, Cassandra Thompson. I am a speaker, a consultant, an iced coffee lover, and I want to help you make deeper connections. But to do that, we got to get over imposter syndrome. So let's get into it.
Brittany, thank you so much for being here. And if you could first go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself to everyone. Tell us about you.
I am Brittany Ashley. I'm the founder, owner of a company called Creative Dynamic Virtual Services, which actually was started to help moms work from home. As a mom of one, now two, I realized that when businesses, organizations say that they're not, or they're flexible, they end up not being flexible. And so I really struggled with, especially in the tech industry. I used to work in the tech industry. I just felt that I needed extra flexibility for drop-offs, pickups, and all these things in the mix, that there was just really nothing out there. I'm based in Victoria, BC, and sometimes the jobs would be downtown area, and we like to call it the Langford crawl. And I just knew I didn't want to stick in that anymore. And so one thing led to another. I kind of started this kind of like a side hustle. And then unfortunately, my dad passed away. And I just realized that life was too short and just to kind of really step into this into full tuition. And I've really never really looked back. It was right before COVID too, because why not start a business right during COVID?
Of course.
And never really looked back. And since then, I've been doing this for about 4.5, almost 5 years. It's more or less done for you services. So whatever you can think of, we can probably do. But I'm also a certified business coach, imposter syndrome coach. I just this year started to tap a little bit more into public speaking on imposter syndrome, how to outsource and scale your business. I like to wear many hats. Yeah, so that's kind of how I've started my journey. And I've worn many hats from before this business, but I really have worked in other industries in tech. For example, project manager within the event industry, you name it, I probably have done it, which I love because it just makes me understand different businesses.
Yeah, no, I resonate with you on that because that was, so I came out of the television industry and then I did a stint in tech in gaming and then went into higher ed and did that at a private institution and then a state institution, which are very different things. And yeah, I think it's why I was a career coach for years because I'm just fascinated by all the different jobs that are out there and it's not one size fits all. And the tech thing, it is not the point of what we will talk about today. But when you brought up the flexibility in tech, yes, I always laughed at, tech companies love to say unlimited vacation. I go, cool.
Yeah.
When is there an opening to take it? There isn't one. There is never an opening.
No, there is never. Yeah. So that's kind of where my passion came from. And it's a mix to help moms, but then also to empower women to come together as a collective. So that kind of like the two kind of molded together, give or take.
Cool. And then we're going to talk today mainly about imposter syndrome because when you approached me with this topic, I went, yes, I want to talk about that because I have been through my own imposter syndrome before. And I want to start off by asking, how did you end up going down the imposter syndrome coaching rabbit trail? How did that happen, that became part of what you do?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I started my business agency now. And I just felt like there was always a trend that a lot of moms or women would come to me and they just felt like they were not good enough to do all of these great things that they said that they wanted to do, but there was something holding them back. And I just was like, I want to be a helping person. I've always wanted to help and get people to their next limit because I know that if we build the proper foundations for everybody, everyone can soar. And it's just something that's always been a part in me. And I started navigating in the coaching realm. And so I'm actually ACC accredited with the ICF. So when I started my coaching career, it was business coaching, and then I full right into the ICF credentials as well. And when I actually did my business coaching, I submitted a paper on coaching and all of this, which looked into imposter syndrome because it just kind of really fascinated me. It seemed to like right now, it seems to be a trending topic as well. But before then, I was also looking in on myself, feeling like, why am I not feeling competent to do all these things? A part of like this side of me was like, yes, you can do it. The other piece of me, like, no, just chill over here.
Yeah.
So with that, I actually did my course with Dr. Valerie Young. Please look her up. She like pretty much focused her whole life on establishing this coaching program on imposter syndrome. And I've actually taken two back-to-back courses with her specifically to just kind of really finesse my skills. But with that, I just love knowing that I can talk more about it and really inspire others to know that they're not the only ones. Cause I find we all feel like we're the only ones ever suffering. And sometimes we as women feel like we can't speak about it. And I'm really at this point where I want us to start acknowledging it and lifting each other up because I think the more of us as women could come together as a collective, we can move mountains.
Yeah. I just kind of laughed at what you said of most women have it. When I was really going through it, one of the people that I was comparing myself to was like, I don't really struggle with imposter syndrome. It's not my thing. Oh, good. That cool. So you're one of the few, not making me feel any better that I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what to do over here. So, okay, I would love to know, how do you define, let's like get our terms straight. How do you define imposter syndrome? Because you're right, it is a buzzword. And I don't know if we always mean imposter syndrome when we use imposter syndrome. So what is
Yes.
imposter syndrome?
So it's the psychology, like there's a psychology behind it, but overall, what I just like to make it straight point blank is that we just feel like we're not competent to do something, even though we've maybe went to school 100 years. I like to say 100 years because that's a joke in me that I've been to school for so long, but we're just not competent to maybe say, go do a marketing plan, even though our background is in marketing, or I want to be a project manager in tech. And I just don't have that experience, even though I've been doing it on the sidelines. So
Right.
when I started like my company, going back to that, all of these moms kept coming to me being like, oh, like you paired me with this client, but I don't feel like I can do it. I'm like, but you have already done it. Or
Mhm.
there's could be some places, for example, that you wanting to apply to a new job, and there's some things that we might not apply to. And we as women, unfortunately, will hold ourselves back on not applying to that job versus men.
Right.
They're just, I don't know, what would you say? They're just really good
Well,
at faking it till they're making it.
yeah, and we look at it and go, oh, I meet 9 of the 10 qualifications, so I shouldn't apply. And they will say, oh, I meet 5 of the 10 qualifications, so
Yes.
I should be the top person. Like,
Yeah.
it's just how we're wired, is how I put it. I wouldn't even like, I don't think we have to delve deeper than that. There are just
Mm,
differences, but that's good to
yeah.
hear that. Okay, it's the idea of, I just don't think I'm competent at doing something. How do
Yeah.
you think, or do you think comparison works with imposter syndrome? Amplify. I feel my personal feeling is like comparison is the thief of joy. We've
hmm
all heard that, but I feel like comparison almost begets imposter syndrome. But I'm curious
It's
your thoughts.
Yeah, I believe it's definitely integrated in some way. So when you look at the research, sorry, I'm losing my voice there. When you look at the research, sometimes you can see that it's interconnected to when you're upbringing. So I mentioned to you that I do have dyslexia and self-diagnosed with ADHD, and it's shown to with imposter syndrome, those with learning disabilities might suffer imposter syndrome a little bit more. I'm also Métis, and it also shows with imposter syndrome, those of different minorities backgrounds sometimes suffer with imposter syndrome. And then the family upbringing. So it's all kind of interconnected. So it's just kind of, it's when you're experiencing those imposter syndrome thoughts, you need to kind of like look back and kind of see of why am I feeling this? Is this coming from me, or is this coming from my childhood? Is this because I'll just speak to myself growing up with dyslexia, and I'm now self-diagnosed, like I said, with ADHD, but it all makes sense now. I felt like I never fit into a 9 to 5 or all these other things because I'm constantly go, 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 one and done on to the next once I've mastered something else. But I just felt like I never fit in, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't. So part of me started having these imposter syndrome thoughts, thinking I'm not competent because others would make me maybe feel like I wasn't competent. So it's like ingrained in my whole life. I personally I'm just stepping more on the forefront talking about my heritage of being Métis as well. And usually, unfortunately, with stigma, it is kind of said that those who are First Nation, Indigenous, Métis, whichever, they live on the reserve and they're all dumb. And
Okay,
so,
so wait, can I interrupt for a second?
yeah,
For pardon my ignorance, maybe it's you're in, I don't know, maybe it's because you're in
yeah,
Canada and I'm in the US. What is
yeah.
Métis?
It is a mix of French Canadian and
Okay,
Indigenous people.
got it.
Mhm.
Okay, I figured it had something to do with Indigenous people by that last thing you said, but that is not
Yes.
a term I know in Southern Cal, like in where I
Mhm.
grew up in Southern California. So thank you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I
No,
understood
yeah, no
what it was.
worries.
Yeah,
So a lot
yeah.
of my cousins, for example, a good chunk of them live back home where I'm originally from, and a lot of them have a little bit more of I'm half or quarter, I guess you would say, where some are half or some are full Indigenous background. So that's I'm kind of in the mix of the trail, but with even just seeing how they were treated and or just seeing how we've stereotyped just people in general, you're trying to live up to those expectations and people pleasing mix because you don't want to be classified as maybe dumb, stupid, or whichever somebody might be looking to you as. And so imposter syndrome comes up for us as we maybe grow our business and or in different levels of in a 9 to 5, we're feeling like we're held back even with networking, probably. I feel like just this year, I'm like, let's just go and let everybody, like, obviously not tell my secrets, but I don't care. I'm going to show up authentically who I am and be
Mhm.
organic and share my story because I know I started my business. I started all this for a passion versus profit. And I need to show up and let go of that imposter syndrome thoughts that if I'm not enough or if I'm not competent, no one's going to hear my stories and what I really want to pursue in the business as a whole.
And so let's talk about that a little bit
Mhm.
about how do you think imposter syndrome shows up in networking? I think one thing I had kind of written before is I just see it as inadequacy. I think a lot of people go to let's say, and when I say networking, so let's define networking to me is building authentic relationships. It's not one and done. It's not
Yeah.
just like at a mixer, but let's start there. Like you go to
Mhm.
an event where you're going to meet new people. I feel like there's a lot of people who feel inadequate or maybe like they don't belong in the room.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that
I
play out?
I definitely can see where a lot of people could think that, and I do too. Like sometimes I push myself. I'm like an introvert extrovert a little bit. And
Mhm.
so when I need to really know that I'm going to this event to mentally prepare to be that social person because I'm also worried that I might not fit in or I might say the
Mhm.
wrong thing. And sometimes when you go to networking events, naturally, sometimes people just know each other and they stick into their little groups. And so it's just kind of awkward. And you're like, well, I think I might go talk to that group. And you go to the group and they don't really fully acknowledge you. And they're like, well, that's awkward and go away.
I've literally had that happen. Like I have a talk on networking where I talk about there were two women
Yeah.
talking and I walked up and they would not break eye contact with each other. They just
Oh,
stared
no.
at each other and they kept talking and I looked back and forth and I was waiting for an opening and they wouldn't give one. And I'm talking like 3 minutes went by, which feels like an eternity. And I
Yes.
just backed right on out. And I went, well, y'all are rude. We're gonna move on.
Yes.
So what can people do before they go to something like that
Mhm.
to sort of help combat this feeling of
Mhm.
this false feeling of incompetence, this imposter syndrome?
I think a little bit of like self pick me up talk. So affirmations, a lot of people like to say. So more or less, I am worthy of being here. I have something to say. Maybe you're going to networking event to say something. I am worthy of building my business, or not even if I'm worthy, but I am enough to be here.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of thinking of what maybe your negative thoughts are and how to turn them more into a positive affirmation for yourself. So some people like to name the imposter syndrome. So I've met a few people who like to name their imposter syndrome like Angry Fred, for example. They're like, oh,
Okay.
here comes Angry Fred again. Why are you telling me all this negative notation when I know that I should be there? So you know what? I'm going to quiet it and think of some positive affirmations and then I'm going to step into it. It's stepping into the fear of the unknown sometimes. But to grow a business or even to grow your career, sometimes you need to make those little strides. You might not necessarily need to do all of it right away.
Right.
Or if you're like me, who's like, why not? So I just did like a speaking on a panel. I hate public speaking. Okay. I'm horrified of it because I struggle sometimes with language a little bit from my dyslexia. Sometimes I can't pronounce things properly. So I hate being in front of the crowd. And then I hate traveling as well by myself. So I had like all the combinations, but I got invited to be on a panel on how to scale a business. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And so I just remember like, oh my God, this is just too much for me. But I'm like, no, I'm here. I'm going to do it. I'm going to rock it. And luckily I had the extra support of my sales consultant there as well. And also asking other people around you, maybe you might know somebody within the networking events, just naturally go to them and maybe they can connect you with a few others. And if you don't know anybody, I always try to read the room to see who might be standing by themselves, who might be like feeling like I am lost in the crowd and just kind of like beeline it to them.
Yeah, I know. That's what people with events in particular, we think everyone else is super comfortable and we forget that everyone else is actually just as nervous as you are. And the second you break that ice, they're like, oh, thank God, so it changes it.
Exactly. I know we kind of touched imposter syndrome on women, but I really want to kind of stress too, like imposter syndrome doesn't discriminate. So it does show up in with men too. I know a lot of like general conversations talk specifically more about women, but I'm also want to make sure I hit that it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It really shows up for all of us. So it says stats about 84% of small business owners feel imposter syndrome thoughts in some time. And I believe that is also 70% of CEOs, women feel imposter syndrome thoughts. So it usually hits like high achievers as well. So when you're looking at somebody in the room and networking, they might be feeling it as well. So remember those stats and just try to like shake it up. Who cares about their title? They're just people too. Just go up and say something. At the end of the day, they could be rude and you could be like, never want to talk to them again. Not my people.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring that up because two thoughts come to mind with that. One, like earlier you were saying, imposter syndromes a lot of times shows up depending on family history, on, ethnicity, etc. And I, by all accounts, would not fit those categories. I'm an only child. I'm hyper independent. I'm an extrovert, right? People I think on the outside would go, she doesn't have imposter syndrome. But going to what you said, it doesn't discriminate. Like, yeah, no, I've been through my bouts of imposter syndrome. For me, it showed up a lot when I started seeing so my business has pivoted now. I don't do career coaching as much anymore. But when I was known as a career coach and in that space, I would see what other career coaches were offering and their marketing language around like, I'm going to tell you the hidden facts that no one tells you about recruiting for tech. And I'd be like, but they know the hidden detail. I don't know the hidden details. And then I'd watch whatever they did and go, oh, I knew that. They just used really good marketing language. That's just marketing. It's not that they know something I don't know, but it would freak me out all the time. And then there was something else you said with that I want to talk about. Oh, when you say it doesn't discriminate in the CEO, I used to work with college students and I would have to tell them that about professors. One of the schools I worked at, we would do a lot where we would bring professors into res life, right? Residence halls and have them come to a mixer or something. And I would have to prep the students ahead of like, you guys, I know you see them as the authority, but they are nervous. They are walking into your space. They are going, I hope they like me. I hope I'm impressive. You need to go walk up to them. Like you think they're feeling great. And I promise you, they're going, oh, I don't know what to do, So for some reason, I think we always think like, oh, the person who's senior, they've got it together. And then you learn, oh no, we're all just trying to figure it out,
And sometimes, sure, they might have it all figured out, but it doesn't hurt to just go up to that person and just break into a conversation. Because I find too, when we start putting titles on different names and all these things, we might be holding ourselves back for some great connection that we don't know what's going to lead into something else. So for anybody listening, I just challenge you to kind of make that next kind of conversation and just see how it goes. So I was just at a networking event and I didn't even know, but I was talking to the board of directors and they organically just like, do you want to be on the board? And I was like, this is sure. So you just never know what can lead to something else. And it's
Yeah.
networking in itself. I think we should think of it of a more of a way, a beautiful connection and collaboration with people of the values of what we see fit in our own
Yeah.
lives and businesses and so forth. So we maybe look at it at a different angle than just I'm going to network. It will help us maybe change a little bit of the mindset too.
Yeah. No, that's why I love to say, like, you're going to go and you're just going to meet interesting people and you see what happens. You
I will,
know, sometimes
yes.
you meet someone and they become your next business partner, your next client.
Yeah,
Sometimes you meet someone and they become your friend. And that's
exactly.
great too.
I do a lot of network online because my business is online. And I randomly networked with somebody who has their own radio show, which led to having my own radio show. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of, you just never know. And that's why I always say, be kind to everyone because you just
Yeah.
don't I made a connection 2 years ago and they were an employee and now they have this big role and they're like, hey, remember me? I remember you. Do you want to do a bid on this project? And we won it. And it's going to not only get our name well out there, but it's also an
Hmm.
impactful project that we're doing as well that sees fit for our organization.
Right. I think when you say be kind to everyone, I think that's the thing. You know, having worked in television and worked in Los Angeles, right? It's a town of, it's all about who you know. And there are some people who use networking really nastily. Like, it was very fascinating. I worked in TV and then I worked in career coaching, but for students working in television. So I'd still go to industry events. And the change in people when they learned, like in the beginning, I thought everyone was nice no matter what when I worked in
Yeah.
television. And then when I didn't work in it and I go to an event and say, oh, I work at this school, it was fascinating to watch people be like, oh, okay. Oh, interesting. And they kind of look over my shoulder for who else they could talk to that could get them the next job. And I'm sitting there going, you don't know who I know. You didn't ask me what I did before this, right? But on the flip side, so that's kind of the ugly side of the way networking worked there. But there were also people who did it so well. So on the flip side of that, I will say, I, at one point, was going to a Starbucks down the street from me every morning to work, just to be motivated and get out of my house. And, you know, the same people worked there every morning and the same customers came in every morning. This is like at least 10 years ago. Okay.
No.
Things don't work the same way now, but this is back when like people were regulars and coffee didn't cost $7 each
Yes.
time, right? And the baristas there, I still remember Barista Kyle. He was great. Like, they were all, I don't want to use the word wannabe in a rude way, but they were wannabe aspiring actors. And they built relationships with every person who walked in the morning. They knew their customers. And then when they had a sketch show coming up, when they had a play, they'd slip their flyer to the person and no one cared because they had been so nice to, it's like, thanks, you give me good service, you brighten my day. Like, people
Yes.
don't even think about little things like that. And you don't know where that barista ends up one day. Maybe Kyle is famous now and I don't know it.
Yeah.
But like, you just don't know who the person, and let me put it this way
Yeah.
too. There were very famous actors that came in every morning. It was a magical Starbucks. I still to this day will not tell people where it was because I don't want to I don't want to blow up anyone's spot, but like,
Yes.
there were big actors that came in that they would talk to, but they'd also be just as nice to the person in line behind them because you don't know if the person in line behind them is a assistant to the president of a network. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you just don't know. So it's like, just be kind to everybody. It makes life easier then.
100%. And you might not even say, maybe they said something wrong to you and it rubbed you the wrong way, but you can still say, thank you for that. And like bow out nicely. But you don't have to blow things up or blow things over. Just, I find sometimes we sometimes react too fast with thinking about it. And so just
for
be
sure.
mindful of all the things above when you're going sometimes to networking events. Because I've seen some interesting situations to say where I was late because my kiddos, who knows, life as a mom.
Yeah.
I just remember showing late to this networking event and this particular person who I know and made connections with, all I could see is that she seemed to be in distress and looked like she was going to be in tears. Like, what happened? Like, what? I just got here and I found her after, and there's people picking on her because she had a service dog and they said that her service dog didn't belong. She actually, and she
How
has
bizarre.
severe anxiety. And it's like, how you don't know this? Are you a doctor? So keep your opinions to yourself. You can't, just like the old saying, if you can't say anything nice, don't say it at all. And
Right.
let her network. And then she ended up leaving early. And I just felt so bad. And I'm like, why can't we just all be nice and kind? Because you just don't know the reasoning behind something.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And I think on the flip side too, I will say, like, as much as I sit here and go, be kind to everyone. Look, I know there's someone listening right now who goes, well, I met you and you weren't kind to
Yeah.
me. You know what I mean? Like, we all have a bad day.
Yeah.
We all say something that we didn't mean snarky, but someone took it snarky,
Mhm.
things like that. So there is the give people the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
side too. But just in approaching people, I think in general is don't try and size people up when you go to an event. Going back to the imposter syndrome
Yes.
thing, right? Sometimes we size people up as, oh, I don't feel worthy of being here. I don't feel adequate here because these are, let's say, executives. But we also do it the other way where we get in a conversation with someone and go, oh, they're an intern. Crap, I got stuck talking to the interns. This doesn't help me. Or, oh, this person just started their business 3 months ago. They're brand new to business. This isn't the person I want to talk to. And again, it's like, no. Don't size people up that way. Like, just talk to them because maybe they just started their business, but maybe they're going to be one of those people who
Really.
is huge in 6 months. And maybe they're not. Maybe you just find out they're a super cool person that you'd like to go get lunch with. So there's something of like, take out the status, if you will.
I feel like it's really hard because of social media. Like it's just so much noise out there, more so than ever. And so we're
Yeah.
constantly going to be comparing ourselves to that perfect, shiny object that we see online. But unfortunately, there is nothing perfect. I'm like a working perfectionist. And that's a lot that the characteristics for imposter syndrome. You can be like a perfectionist, a superhuman. So a perfectionist is that you have to do everything perfect. And if you don't, then you have failed and you're not competent. I'm also considered like an expert. So I need to go do all these courses before I can go do anything. Because if I can't maybe ace that conversation, I'm not an expert, even though I do know a lot in maybe that industry. So for me, I fall into those categories. So I'm constantly telling myself, going back to like the coaching that you were talking about, not feeling like you're competent as a coach, I also experience that always because you always feel like you're not doing enough. Or did I say the right questions? I see that this coach is doing it this way. And actually, Dr. Valerie Young mentioned like a good chunk of us coaches end up experiencing imposter syndrome, and a good chunk of us end up not really fully pursuing coaching because we have so much imposter syndrome that's holding us back because we see all of these great shiny objects, marketing that a lot of people can do well, but doesn't say sometimes that they're a good coach. So I've experienced my handful of interesting coaches where that's why I became a coach, to educate others on what is a coach, what is a mentor, what's so forth in between.
Yeah. So what are some things we can do? Like we talked a little bit about like right before an event, but let's say imposter syndrome is something you're struggling with in your business, in your day-to-day life. What are a couple of things people can do to start building confidence and getting over that imposter syndrome? I know you talked about affirmations. Are there other thoughts there?
I think it would be important to figure out where the imposter syndrome is coming up. So I find a lot of business owners struggle with imposter syndrome sometimes when they're ready to scale. Like I'm not ready to take on that 6-figure client because I just don't think I'm good enough. Or you know what, I should probably deny that client because my pricing, or like I should price more but I shouldn't. Like I know we as women sometimes struggle with pricing. I know I do, but more or less figuring out where that's coming up, maybe not if it's positive affirmations, but writing it down and thinking of things of how you can silence it a little bit. So if you know that it's always coming up in your discovery calls, how do you show up authentically to you in that discovery call? I can't even say I struggled my first year in business on discovery calls because I felt like I had to be perfect. I had to be perfect. If I said the wrong thing, the whole thing was a disaster. But then I realized I just needed to be authentically me because at the end of the day, I want that client, business owner to work with me within the values of what I pursue as well. So it's really sitting down, mapping that out. And then if you're struggling, perhaps maybe you're taking on a new job. And the thing is, sometimes imposter syndrome thoughts might come up because maybe we're not well versed in that area. So for example, we do CRM setups. And so I just had this conversation with a client and said, I don't know that CRM, but I know CRMs. I'm pretty confident that I know how to map up your journey mapping piece. It's just being transparent at the end of the day. I feel like we
Yeah.
just try
Yeah.
to be like, yeah, I can do all the things. And my motto is like, yes, I can, but let me review and get back to you. And I don't think there's no why we can't position it that way. It's just more, I think we're just always, it's society that we think that we have to know it right then. If we don't know it, then we're an imposter.
It's funny you say that because I have that same thing. Like, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to have every answer in the moment. And the irony to that is when I worked as a career coach at a university, I would train our student interns. We had student interns who would come in to also help college students, right? And so I would train them on how to do a resume, how to walk through like a career discovery appointment. And I would tell them, if you don't know something, don't make it up. Don't think you can't Google it in front of them. You will be shocked at how much like you can Google in front of someone who comes in and go, I don't know that. Let's look it up and do it together. And they will not be mad at you. Like, and I have to remember that now of they're paying me to just find the answers. And so if it takes me a minute to find the answer, or if I have to say, you know what, I'm going to get back to you on that, and I send an email to them later in the week, like let's say something with LinkedIn for my LinkedIn clients, they're fine with that. But for some reason, we do a lot of times tend to think, oh my gosh, if I don't have the answer right now in the moment, I'm a failure. I'm not the expert I think I am. I am not worthy of getting paid. And it's like, no, they're paying you just to find the answer so that they don't have to, and you're okay.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a big thing to think of as well. I just going back to like society and the general norms, I feel like we're just kind of ingrained in that a little bit in society that we should know the answer all the time. And if we don't know the answer, sometimes it feels like you might get that backlash. But I feel like the more transparent and honest you are, like I just got this note and it comes from your heart too. If you really explain it and get clients to understand, like you are first and I will get back to you. I just need a moment. Even if you're doing like a consulting thing, because maybe they're talking about something that you've never done before, or maybe it's you know how to do it, but you don't know that specific program. Every program is going to work slightly different. So you can't promise the moon and stars until you actually take a look a little bit more under the hood.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, to wrap up, do you have one networking related tip, since we're all about networking here, authentic networking? So that's relationship building in general. It could be for an event, it could be following up. One thing that you really try to put into action that you encourage others to put into action.
If you're nervous about networking, I personally always map out, I'm going to meet at least 5 people. I don't have to meet everybody in the room, but I want to at least meet 5 people and make some kind of genuine connection. And then if you're super nervous, sit down before the event and just see if you can map out questions. Just open-ended questions that can start the conversation a little bit than just a simple yes and no conversational style. And think of things, maybe what you might want to share. Because sometimes you might be super nervous and you get there and you're like, I don't even know what to talk about. What do I tell them about?
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like
preparation is key.
Yeah. And I always feel too, don't think of it as like a pitch. Think of it as, this might be my new best friend. I personally like thinking like that versus of a pitch in sales. I don't want to be like known as that car salesman. I really want to know authentic connection. So if you're truly authentic to your values and showing up authentically, you're just naturally going to attract those people to you.
Yes, very against elevator pitches here. It's a hill I will die on. So yes, you never pitch at an event unless you're the one speaking and they told you to pitch your services. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only time. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
We will put in the show notes where everyone can find you, connect with you, etc. And just thank you for sharing your story with me and with us. And with that, y'all, have a great one.
Thanks everyone.